20 minutes. I mean, think about that. It's barely enough time to grab lunch or watch an episode of a sitcom. In the grand, sweeping story of human history, it's nothing. But for one man, it was his entire reign as king.
So how is that even possible, right? It sounds like a joke, or maybe a typo in an old history book. But it's absolutely real, and it's one of the strangest, most debated events in all of royal history. So yeah, let's get into it.
We are talking about King Louis XIX of France, and his time on the throne was so ridiculously short, so unbelievably fleeting, that it's become this piece of legendary trivia that you almost can't believe is true. Now, to even begin to understand how something this bizarre could happen, we have to go back. We need to meet the man at the heart of the story, long before he became king for, 20 minutes. His name was Louis-Antoine. Before he was the 20-minute king, Louis-Antoine was known as the Dauphin. Now, if you were a French royal, this was the ultimate title besides king. It meant you were next in line, the crown prince. It's a job that's basically all about waiting. And this guy, he spent decades of his life just waiting.
And his royal connections were, they were as deep as they get. He was the son of a king, heir to the powerful Bourbon dynasty, and he was married to the daughter of maybe the most famous king in French history, Louis XVI, the one who lost his head. So for him, royalty wasn't just in his blood, it was his entire world.
You gotta understand, his was a life spent literally in the shadow of the throne. He was born a prince, but then the French Revolution just swept his world away, and he was forced to live in exile for years. Imagine waiting your whole life, only becoming the official heir, the Dauphin, in 1824 when you're almost 50 years old. He spent a lifetime preparing for a job he'd barely even have.
But here's the thing. Louis-Antoine's story wasn't really shaped by his patience. It was forged in pure chaos, because the political situation back in France was a ticking time bomb, and it was about to explode, creating the perfect conditions for one of history's absolute weirdest moments.
So flash forward to July 1830. Paris was basically a powder keg ready to blow. People were furious with the monarchy, and the entire kingdom was just teetering on the brink of total collapse. It was a brutal reminder that a crown is only as secure as the people allow it to be.
And it all fell apart so fast. The king, Charles X, tried to crack down and impose these super strict policies, and Paris just erupted. The riots were so bad, so out of control, that the king literally had to flee for his life. He abandoned the capital, proving that the monarchy could be broken in just a matter of days.
Which brings us to the day, August 2nd, 1830. In a room in a chateau outside of Paris, history was about to get very, very strange. The entire fate of the French crown was about to be decided in less time than it takes to make dinner.
Okay, so just picture this sequence of events. First, the old king, Charles X, signs the paper giving up the throne. The instant he does that, boom, the law is automatic. His son, Louis-Antoine, is instantly King Louis XIX. But then, there's this pause. Witnesses said he hesitated for about 20 minutes, and then he picks up the pen and signs his own abdication. The crown was his, and then just like that, it was gone.
So why? Why on earth would he do that? Why give up the one thing he'd been waiting for his entire life? Well, it was a desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to save his family's dynasty. The revolutionaries, they hated him and his father. Their only hope, they thought, was to skip a generation, to put his young nephew on the throne instead. But here's the kicker. The plan completely backfired. The politicians back in Paris basically looked at these two abdications and went, yeah, no. They just ignored them completely and picked their own guy to be king. The whole sacrifice was for nothing. It was a pretty harsh lesson that the power wasn't in the bloodline anymore.
And this is where the story gets even more complicated. Because his reign was so bizarrely short, a debate started almost immediately that's still going on today. Was Louis XIX ever actually the King of France?
And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? Was this a real, legitimate reign, just an incredibly short one, or was it just some weird legal blip on the radar that doesn't really count? It really makes you think about what actually makes someone a monarch.
What's so fascinating is you can argue this both ways. The case for him being king is all about the letter of the law. The second his father abdicated, legally, he was king. End of story. And the royalists certainly saw him that way. But the case against him is about reality. He was never officially proclaimed king, no other country recognized him, and maybe the biggest tell,
He signed away the throne as Louis-Antoine, his birth name, not as Louis XIX, his royal name.
So no matter which side of that debate you fall on, what's the legacy of this whole thing? I mean, how do we remember the 20-minute monarch today?
Well, his legacy is kind of a mixed bag. For historians, he's this perfect symbol of the final, almost comical collapse of the main Bourbon dynasty. For the rest of us, he's just an amazing piece of trivia, right? He's in the record books. And for the French royalists who followed him into exile, he remained their symbolic king for the rest of his life.
And you know, this quote really just nails it. Whether you think he was a real king or not, you just can't deny that his little moment on the throne is one of the strangest, most surreal handovers of power in the history of the world.
So, I'm going to turn the final call over to you. After hearing all this, what do you think? Was he a real king for 20 minutes? Or was he never really king at all? Let me know what you think down in the comments. I am genuinely curious to see where everyone lands on this one.
And that's it for today's deep dive. Thank you so much for hanging out with me to unpack this truly wild piece of history. If you had fun with this one and maybe learned something new, do me a favor and hit that like button. It really does help. And of course, subscribe for more dives into the weirdest and most fascinating corners of history. We'll see you in the next one.